Okay, I'm recording.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome if this is a first time for you to attend the member forum, and welcome back to everyone else who has been here before. I'm Deb Radman, and I get to have the privilege of being your moderator. Couple of housekeeping items. One, use your mute button. Most of you have that on. And if you have a question during the discussion or a comment that you want to make, please submit it via the chat at the bottom, the chat bubble, so that we can call on you or address the question or comment that you're making. And of course, as you just heard, Paul has the record button going, and so this forum is also being recorded. Thank you for being here. And now, Paul, would you tee us up with our learning objectives?
Sure. Thank you, Deborah. And good morning, everybody. Looks like we've got great attendance once again, and we want to ensure that each one of these member forums are a value add to each of you. So let's be sure to get into that chat below, put some questions out there. It's something that our SMEs will be happy to address, as well as, you know, the questions you have are probably questions that more than just you have. And so don't be intimidated. Get in there. Let's share the chat. Let's make sure that you get your questions answered. Today there is some new drafts, and I'm gonna actually let Marilyn jump into it, but there's some new drafts and a new rollout as far as protocols coming out, and so we want to cover a little bit of that, or probably a majority of that today, and we brought in our SMEs to be able to assist with your questions. So please, once again, get into the chat. Thank you and good morning. Just want to remind everybody, next Wednesday is our regularly scheduled safety committee, okay, that we hold, but we've been holding for quite some time, and our focus next week will be on employee wellness and mental health when it comes to how are our employees and our team dealing with the stresses and adjustments that have had to be made in the last couple of months. And it's important for us to not just make sure that we're in support of our team, but we can identify certain things within character or statements or just overall general attitude on how they're doing, and be able to address that, you know. So it's something that if you hadn't had to experience before within your workforce, you'll probably see a lot more of it as the protocols start coming back or leaning up, and we start getting our manpower back into the office, to be able to identify some of the things that they need to be going through. You can approach the new thing together and with a strategy. So that'll be next Wednesday. We are looking at, you know, we did a survey or a poll last week about the frequency at which we will continue with these member forums. We do want to ensure that they're a value add each time we have them, and we don't want them to become stale or just a repetitious meeting. So we decided that we're going to try and do them every other week, okay, for now, and we'll see where that goes. It looks like there's more demands, or there's a lot of new protocols coming out where we need to get everybody informed. We will increase the frequency, but we look on stepping a bit back for the month of July. Having said that, I'm going to pass over this conversation to Marilyn Stansberry, our CEO, and she's going to introduce you to our awesome SMEs and kind of outline today's discussion. Thank you, Marilyn. You're on mute.
I'm muted. Oh, you get to say that today, right?
Yep.
That's awesome. Thanks, Deb. Thanks, Paul. And thank you all for being on the call. I know that we have a lot of people that are on the phone or have their video hidden, but I encourage you throughout this conversation to please be participants as well and ask questions. You know, raise your hand or post something on chat, just to let us know that you're out there and want some clarification. Today, we're going to go back through our what's top of mind. And as Paul mentioned, there is a new executive order in draft that is going to move us from safer at home to protecting our neighbors in terms of topic. We're going to hear a little bit more about that today and expect that order to come out by the end of the week, if I have my timing correct. And to be part of that conversation today, Kristen White, attorney at law with Fisher and Phillips. Kristen, I didn't see your mug today, but it wasn't Superwoman. It must be something equally fascinating though. So thanks for being on. Also joining us today is David Scott. David is the HR director with Encore Electric, the past president of the IECRM Board of Directors, and the co-chair of the Government Relations Committee, another big topic we're going to talk about today in terms of what passed and what didn't, and what does that mean for us moving forward, COVID or not. Also with us is Herb Phelps. Herb is our other co-chair of the Government Relations Committee, former member of the Board of Directors, both of these gentlemen are awesome contractor members and industry partners with IEC. Also with us on the call today is Kurt Olson. Kurt is with Whipfly. He has been joining us along with Pete Aiden the last few weeks. It's getting close to tax season, so Pete had some appointments this morning, but Kurt is going to be sharing with us the things that are top of mind from a tax and finance and other perspective, as well as some things that are also related to the legislative session. And then Jay Hicks and Stefan Stathopoulos, Stefan, I'm trying, they're on today to talk about what happened in the last 3 weeks during the legislative session, and frankly for the last 6 months for the legislative session, and they will be giving us more detail on what happens next. Deb, I'm gonna let you get started with our panel discussion today.
Okay, thank you, Marilyn. So it's been an interesting 90 days, has it not? I don't have to say this, but we all know we are living and working through a crisis that has hit our supply chain and our economy, and that we've never faced before, and hopefully we'll never face it again. We're making decisions one day, then new data appears, and we have to make a completely opposite decision the next day. We're all working in places we never thought we would work, like our kitchen tables. And as of right now, we aren't really sure when we'll meet face-to-face again to do business with each other. So with that, I'd like our subject matter experts to talk about what's new, what's in the news, changes in workers' comp. We'll get into that. And of course, as Marilyn said, Jay and Stefan will do the recent legislative session. But as we always like to do is start with Kristen White, who is attorney at law with Fisher and Phillips. And Kristen, let's start with what's new in the governor's new executive order, which is supposed to, I think, go into effect tomorrow, right?
I think it's, let me see. Yeah, you're right. Starting Thursday after public comment, we've got the new guidelines. So it looked like, you know, and I was trying to determine if I could find anything related to construction and work. And it seems like it's more going to affect our personal lives, I think, is what it appears to be. You know, as far as the bars are opening now at 25% capacity, some summer camps. I mean, the big one for us may be, you know, indoor events like conferences and receptions can begin to open. You know, they can allow up to 75 people in them, depending on the size of the room, maybe up to 100, maintaining social distancing and masks. They're going to allow some outdoor events for us, you know. So, I mean, so many things have already been canceled for the summer, so I'm not sure how that, you know, will affect things. And then some different provisions for like non-critical manufacturing. But I didn't see any, you know, and haven't read, so I'd be curious if others have, any changes for how construction and critical business is operating as far as symptom checks and face coverings. That all appears, you know, I'm not seeing where that's going to change. It seems like we're just going to be opening more things, but they're going to be following the guidelines you all have been following and we've been following for, you know, the last few months, is what I've been seeing from this on the state level. We've got some changes. Deb, do you want me to talk about, we've got some changes from the CDC on some testing. Do you want me to talk about that now, or you want to wait?
No, go ahead and just give us the full brief.
Okay. The other thing that came out just this week is the CDC's issued a new testing strategy for what they call high density critical infrastructure workplaces. And so if you read it, it's primarily for like, indoor poultry, workers. But this high density, I think you've got to read pretty broadly that if you've got any work sites where you've got a lot of people working in critical work, I think this testing strategy would be useful. So I'll share it with Holly. We did a news alert on it yesterday. She can send it out, but it's basically where you're going. And, we've had the guidance for a long time from the CDC that for critical workers, if you're exposed, but you remain asymptomatic, you can come back to work as long as you social distance and wear a mask. We've had that for a while. So this is being put in place and kind of in conjunction with that and saying, okay, we know it's critical, you've got this guidance, but now we want you to break your workers into 3 tiers based on exposure. And so they're saying if they're tier 1, which is your highest likely exposure, those who work, very close contact with the worker who tested positive or was exposed, they need to be treated differently than those in like tier 2 and tier 3, meaning those who may have had contact and those who just share common spaces. One of the things it talks about is if you're going to bring them back while they're asymptomatic, they want people to start testing them more now that we're getting more testing. So, obviously the CDC, the preferred method, even for critical workers, is they stay out for 14 days. But I know a lot of critical workers, especially construction, we've been following the guidelines to bring them back. So now they're saying if we want to do that, they want us to implement some baseline testing and some retesting every 3 days for that tier 1, those highly exposed workers, if they're going to be back in the workplace. So I won't go through any more. There's kind of details for tier 2 and tier 3, but it essentially follows kind of a testing guidelines in order to bring them back. So it's something to take a look at if you've been following the guidelines that workers can come back as long as they're asymptomatic. They want you to start increasing the testing for them. And I would think here in Colorado, I know we've got pretty good testing that this would likely be doable. So that's something to keep in mind, because we've noticed over probably the last few weeks, there's a lot of confusion around when workers can come back. And I think that's because things like this, the guidance changes and has evolved. And so, we'll hear from clients that say, wait, the general contractor's trying to say we got to shut the whole job site down because we've got one person exposed. And so we have to go back and try to, give them information to educate the contractors on what the guidance is. So just be aware of that there is a lot of confusion out there. I don't think people are, trying to do it wrong. I think it's just that because, like as Deb mentioned, things have evolved so much over the last 3 months. The guidance has changed that not everyone's kept up, and it's just confusing. So I'll send that to Holly and Marilyn so they can send out a link on that guidance for the CDC, because it's definitely worth taking a look at.
The other thing the governor included in his executive order was definitely caution around possible new outbreaks, and also authorization finally for local governments to be able to choose their level of restrictions based on conditions on the ground. So does that mean that the mayors really are going to call those shots, and could it be that Westminster could totally shut down, but Aurora would remain more where we are protecting our neighbors? Is that kind of the scenario?
Oh yeah, good point, Deb. I'm glad you pointed that out. Yes, I mean, that's how I read it, that he's definitely giving more power to local communities to be able to determine if, the rules are being followed, and which may go a little bit to the point we talked about last week, that we're seeing some increased and aggressive enforcement by local health departments. So that may follow in line that as we have local jurisdictions start to manage this themselves, I think that'll play into what we're seeing from this aggressive attitude from the local health departments, that there will be pressure on them to try to keep it managed. I would hope that, yeah, somebody wouldn't just completely shut down unless they had an outbreak. But I think that he's definitely going to give local jurisdictions more power to try to manage it themselves.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, let's go to David Scott. David, and we're going to get into the details in a little bit with with Jay and Stefan. But the state legislature came back for 3 weeks and just recessed on Monday. What is top of mind from a contractor perspective right now regarding the legislative session? Can you give us kind of a high-level summary of what has happened in the last 3 weeks?
Yeah, happy to do so. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So anyway, happy to do so. For those of you who know me, and I've been on the call, I've got some new hardware on my nose. It's been a rough session. No, actually, I wrecked last Wednesday night, and I went over the handlebars and fortunately was able to catch myself with my face. So that's what's going on there.
Oh man.
Anyway, so overall, what seemed to, and I'll give a high level overview, and Herb, Stefan, Jay, if you want to, add any color or details, feel free to. Overall, what seemed important when the session began was not important at all in the end. When we began this session, we had a ready to test licensing bill, and it was getting hot and heavy, and we made some adjustments and stuff like that. Anyway, it has been suspended indefinitely. I recently learned you cannot kill a bill, but you can suspend it indefinitely. So, having said that, the shifting gears to the last 3 weeks, Senate Bill 216, the workers' compensation bill, has been suspended. Let's see, so moving on to Senate Bill 205, that's the mandated sick leave. We were able to limit the definition of family and provide proof of sick. And some employers will still face challenges with the standard, but look for that. And then, oh, shoot, I just lost my place here. There we go. All right. Let's see. Senate Bill 207 increases unemployment insurance contributions from employers, but we were able to delay the implementation of a surcharge and extend the time frame with which increases to the taxable wage base will occur. So it kind of slowed it down a bit. House Bill 1415, moving to the House, is legislation related to whistleblowers. That's another bill that we've got successfully amended to require administrative remedies to be exhausted before allowing workers to file a civil lawsuit. And I think that's huge. And then House Bill 1420, that was going to be, basically roll back all the tax cuts, and we've dialed back the negative impacts of that legislation significantly. So there's still some, but not nearly as much as it was. So that's a very, very high level overview. If Herb and Stefan, feel free to jump in
yeah. Thanks, David. Let's go to the workers' comp bill that didn't pass, and Herb, talk about suspended indefinitely, what that really means. Could it reemerge in a new session? What are the implications for our members if it does?
Well, we're hoping there's not going to be a second wave, and that it probably will not come back since it kind of got killed this time. We don't know what they're going to do in future sessions. It's kind of hard to predict, but if it does come back, pretty much what they're wanting to do is make anybody who's working and comes down with COVID-19 will actually be covered by workers' compensation, whether or not it was acquired at work, which of course the insurance carriers are all pretty much up in arms about that. For one example, I have a client who pretty much told everybody, you're all working from home now. It's pretty much computer company. They can all teleconference in when needed be, or just work from their home computers. And 2 of their employees have come down with COVID-19. Long story short, neither of them were working. They had already been home for 2 or 3 weeks working from home when they came down with it. So there was no connection with the work environment. But had they had this bill passed, they could have actually made claims for workers' compensation for their treatment. So wouldn't have been very fair to the work comp system. So anyway, we're hoping that doesn't come back. Hopefully things will improve as far as the number of people who are getting COVID-19. We won't see a second round of that coming back with people being hospitalized, but it's kind of hard to say now if it'll come back in the next legislative session. Hopefully things will be cleared up by the end of the year. With some things that are going on behind the scenes, the National Council on Compensation Insurance, we touched base on this a little bit earlier, but they actually have come out with a new class code specifically for employees who are furloughed at home, who are still being paid, but who are not working. Normally, that payroll would be counted for workers' compensation premium payments. It doesn't have to be anymore. The class code is 0012. So at the end of your policy year, when you're being audited, if you had any employees who were at home and received pay even though they weren't working, if you use that class code, that will be counted as a rate of 0, so you won't pay anything for that. The other thing they've done is that some employees are working skeleton crews, and certain employees are actually taking on responsibilities they didn't have before. Under workers' compensation laws, they have to be, all of their payroll would go into the highest rated class code. So if you have an employee who was basically working in more of a clerical or sales position, who is now helping out with shipping and receiving, 100% of their payroll for the year would be assigned to shipping and receiving, which is a lot higher, more expensive class code. Well, under the new mandate from the NCCI, you can now separate those payrolls, and for the period prior to or after the COVID-19 carve out, you actually can count that employee as clerical or sales, and just for the time they're helping out with shipping and receiving, you count that payroll under shipping and receiving. So not 100% of their payroll will go under shipping and receiving, which is really a good thing. As far as what we're expecting for rates, it's really also still a little bit up in the air. The NCCI has recommended to the states that that they will not count the losses for your National Council on Compensation Insurance experience rating. So normally claims, any claim you have, no matter how large or small, is put into your experience rating, and it's balanced against what payroll you paid out to come up with a experience mod rating that shows if you're better or worse than average, and it affects your what you pay every year. It affects your rates pretty negatively. So the NCCI has recommended it. I don't know if Colorado has accepted the recommendation or where we are on that, but if they do, if you did have somebody or employees who got sick under COVID-19, those medical bills will not go against the company's experience rating, which is a good thing, at least for employers. Insurance companies may take a different bent on that. With that having been said, for any specific class code, whether it be electrical, clerical, sales, the NCCI keeps statistics on what claims are paid out and what payroll was paid out in the year, and they come up with what's called a lost cost factor. So if an insurance company were to charge that factor, that lost cost per $100 of payroll, they would break even. So the amount of money they take in premium would equal the amount of money they pay out in claims. Now that is going to be affected by COVID-19. So I imagine that any medical workers, maybe people who are driving ambulances, first responders, probably for meat packers, people in the that industry, they're going to see those lost cost rates go up. It's yet to be seen if it's going to affect electricians and other types of industries, but lost costs will be affected by COVID-19. On the good side, right now, unless you are pretty much a medical emergency, you're not receiving treatment. So some of the things that are happening with work comp, people who normally would be getting back surgery or shoulder surgery aren't getting those surgeries right now. People can't go to physical therapists. So those costs actually, or the lack of costs, will be factored into those lost cost rating factors. So we don't know how big of an impact that will have, but that will also function to bring rates down. As far as the carriers, I'm sure that Pinnacle, Hartford, everybody else who's writing workers' compensation in the state, they're going to react when they change their rates effective January 1st of 2021, and they'll look at their situation and they're going to probably, well, I would anticipate that rates will go up because of the individual carriers, what they're going to do with the loss cost. They're going to use a multiplier and they're going to increase their multipliers. But it partly depends upon the type of losses that are still happening. But we're expecting that carriers will raise their rates. We've been having significant rate increases. Well, we've been having rate decreases for the last 4 or 5 years. Just about every year rates have come down a little bit. But I anticipate for 2021, we're going to see some increases, specifically for classes where people are exposed to COVID-19 and we're seeing claims. So that's pretty much in a nutshell what we're expecting.
Herb, is there a link to this information to NCCI or any resources that our members can go to study this further, maybe try to understand it better? What would you suggest?
I do have a link to the NCCI, and I can forward that to Marilyn to share with everybody when she does her summary, when they send out the summary this afternoon, if you would like. And
that would be great, yes.
Yeah, there's a whole list of like 16 or 18 frequently asked questions and answers to those.
Perfect. I think we really need it because it is a bit confusing, and you just gave us a whole boatload of information, which is very, very valuable. And I'm sure as employers, we're going to want to study that more carefully.
And if anybody has any questions, feel free to give me a call. I'd be more than happy to answer them if you come up with something later.
Okay, great. Thank you, Herb, very much. Kurt, let's look at what's going on in the financial and accounting world. Last week, Pete mentioned legislation impacting landlords, and are there any tax issues we should be paying attention to or know more about? We're looking to pick your brain here this morning.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess David mentioned a few of this before, but the House Bill 1420, that probably had the biggest potential impact from a tax side of essentially rolling back all the tax benefits that we recently have been enjoying. Particularly Colorado used to basically follow federal tax rules and take federal taxable income, and with only a few minor adjustments to get your Colorado taxable income. This bill would essentially, the big adjustment would be getting rid of the qualified business income deduction. That's for pass-through entities. That's the 20% deduction that shareholders were able to take on their federal tax return. In the past, Colorado would just allow you to take that and take your federal taxable income, but this bill would require you to add that deduction back in. So it'd be adding 20% of your pass-through business's income back into Colorado taxable income. So that would be a huge tax increase for shareholders of pass-throughs. Then there's also some rules with that relating to net operating losses. Still impactful to some individuals and businesses if you're in that situation. But the big one was that reducing that qualified business income deduction. That would be a big hit. So other than that, kind of some other just reminders. If you do have to pay estimated tax payments, the Q1 and Q2 estimates are due on July 15th. So a lot of businesses are trying to cash flow the distributions for 2 quarters worth of estimated tax payments, as well as possibly paying the taxes from 2019 that are also due on July 15th. So it's kind of a triple hit all at once.
Yeah, it really is. Again, helpful links, Kurt. Anything you can suggest that we could put out in the recap from today would be awesome.
Okay.
And, you know, just so everybody can continue to either monitor certain sites and or look at the FAQs that might be available, and really try to get their heads wrapped around some of these changes. Can we talk about that legislation impacting landlords a bit?
So that one, I actually have not been as up to speed on that one as much as Pete was. Unfortunately, I can't help out much on that one.
Okay, okay. Well, we can try to circle back on that one.
Yeah.
Marilyn, you had really kind of reacted to this one. Did you recall anything what Pete said last week?
I think it was more, I think it was about impacts on landlords related to COVID and, you know, moving people out. If Jay doesn't have it on his tracker or know what happened in the session, we will look up the bill and I'll share that information out. So I just know that it was, when he mentioned the tax changes and the impacts, there was another one that, you know, from his clients that are property landlords, I think they were hearing quite a bit of feedback.
Okay, great, thank you. And Kurt, thank you. That was really helpful stuff. And again, a lot to kind of think through and make business decisions about. And so let's go to Jay and talk about the specifics of the legislative session. It's been kind of a busy 3 weeks for you, Jay. Actually, it's been more like 6 months, but let's get into specifics and the implications of the bills that passed and what members need to know about this new legislation, and then the bills that failed to pass, and for future reference, if they come back in a new session, their implications as well for IECRM members. So Stefan and Jay, you have the floor. Jay, you might be muted.
Yeah, Jay was muted a moment ago. He still is.
You're still muted, Jay.
Audio mute.
Well,
There we go.
Stefan, you want to?
He got it. He's good.
Okay, awesome, awesome.
I don't know how all
Take
this
it away.
works, so hopefully you can hear me. So,
We got
Yes,
it.
we can.
as far as the session, so we'll address the first, the bill that you were talking about, landlords, was not introduced at the end of the session. So there was a lot of talk of a draft that was going through, and it was not introduced as the session concluded. So there was a little bit of discern between some of the members of the legislature because they thought they were going to get that landlord bill and the extension, but it was not introduced. So that bill was only brought up in a lot of drafts and was shared, but it was never introduced. So that's sort of a non-issue for this session. Will we see it for the rest of the sessions? I think depends on how the market goes the rest. There was a couple other bills that the Apartment Association, those got into as who has to take Section 8 money and compensation, but nothing to do with landlords and evictions. That bill was tabled and not heard. So that bill, obviously, we don't have to do too many more research, and I think it was more of people were sending it out to try to get quick feedback, and I think it caused a lot of concern, and a lot of people were calling the legislature and kind of urged that it would not be taken up. So just kind of overall, obviously, what we thought was going to happen, I think David Scott put it very politely. When we were coming back into session, if it wasn't fast, friendly, or free, it wouldn't be taken up. And I think that was on day one kind of forgotten. So a number of bills got introduced, and obviously from IEC, we tracked and probably opposed all of them. As we move forward, obviously, everything from the work comp to the sick leave to Herb's, because 216 was for a pandemic, I don't think it'll be introduced in the 2021 session. The the details of that bill took firefighters 5 years to pass some of those details. So I don't think it's going to be something that the legislature is going to take up, obviously, because most of it was COVID related. And I think what was going to be passed COVID related was going to be done in this session. And we may see some tweaks in the 2021 session for some of the stuff that was passed late in the session. One of those items is obviously sick leave, mandated sick leave for your employees. As David Scott said, it was a bit amended. There was actually some really good amendments at the end, but they were taken out in conference committee. So what they did was try to limit it to employers that were over 15 employees, but that obviously got stripped out, and so it does relate to all, but there is some delayed implementation for smaller businesses. So it'll give time for small businesses to actually get under there. There is an exemption if you have a policy already. I think we've talked about this in a couple different times, but if your company has a policy already, you can actually be exempted from this law, and just would have to qualify your program. 207 was a unemployment insurance bill that we heavily tracked. We actually heavily amended this bill. A lot of the construction industry was affected by some of the definitions of employees and independent contractors that are going to be used. We were actually had the ability to strip most of that, all that section out. And really what 207 turned into was some of the things that the Department of Labor needed to adjust some Colorado law to the federal statutes. And obviously it dealt a little bit with the surcharge that employers were going to see to make the work UI system solvent. In years past, you get a surcharge to help make that solvent. I don't know, they mitigated a little bit of that in 207. But they did adjust some of the taxable wage bases. This bill was actually negotiated by a few of the big business entities like C3 and I think Denver Chamber at the end to modify that through the Senate sponsors of Senator Hansen. So that was almost kind of bought off by some of the business agreement. They got to do that negotiation with 207.
Hey, Jay, one quick question.
Sure.
What was the bill number on the mandatory sick leave?
That's Senate Bill 205.
Okay, thank you.
And
okay, sorry to interrupt.
No, that's great. So if you have any cool questions, I mean, Stefan, obviously, we can get, if you have questions, obviously we've been watching, remote learning, remote everything, and at the Capitol is kind of interesting. At the last couple of days, it seemed like there was more people at the Capitol. It looked like almost irregular days, but obviously committee hearings and everything else were very small and remote, and people submitted to that testimony. Some people did show up, but there was obviously some movement on sick leave and then unemployment. Those were two. And obviously 216, obviously, as Herb said, it was just a big weight on business and a lot of cost. I think they were saying 20 to 30% increased cost, I think was what was projected if that bill were to pass. We'll jump to the Whistleblower Bill. I spent way too much time on this bill, but we were able to get some amendments through this. Obviously, this was deemed as a COVID-related response to, I can tell you, it came from the AFL-CIO, as did most of these bills. So sick leave and those all were AFL-CIO related bills. 1415 dealt with whistleblowing during a COVID response or a pandemic or health emergency. This got to really the focus and the target was the meatpacking plants and the Ubers and Lyfts. So what people felt that they didn't have, they didn't either have proper PPE or proper equipment that was supposed to be provided to them, or their employer had made a recommendation not to use their own, and so or any kind of issues. We had nurses testify that they didn't feel like they had proper equipment. The hard part about this was there was a little negotiation about, well, when everybody was required to have PPE, it was very hard to get. And so even employers who had ordered it and had done their best job to get it, they may not had it. And so obviously when the mask order went in and people were providing their own masks, there was, in certain circumstances, especially like in hospitals, where certain levels of masks were required and they wanted to wear their own mask. There was some issues. And then obviously people who were driving Ubers and Lyft didn't feel like Uber or Lyft provided them with the proper PPE and they had to provide it themselves. But obviously that's a larger legal question than everything. And then obviously everybody knows the news about the meatpacking plants. So that obviously that was the systemic for the 14-15. We were able to get some amendments in there related to construction that changed the definition of principal. Obviously, a lot of people, it was very difficult to get any kind of amendments, but we were able to get a few of them in there to mitigate the possible liability of anybody coming in and whistleblowing, because there's a few terms in there about adverse action. So if you're sent home without pay, is that considered adverse action? So there's going to be some clarification the Department of Labor is going to have to do for this implementation. I have talked to the Department of Labor no less than 453,000 times on this. And it's not their bill, they were just told, but they're a little bit confused on how they're going to implement this or what it's going to look like. All of us in construction understand OSHA has another whistleblower provision as well. And a lot of the discussions were happening that whistleblower already exists. Why do we need something specific to this? So they're going to have to try to figure out how they're going to marry the two. This bill only has 2 years of funding, but I think that's relative to that they believe that they're giving in this bill anybody who wants to make a complaint 2 years to do so, and I think that's where that funding comes from. So we'll definitely be paying attention to this for the foreseeable future.
So Jay, quick question on the definition of principal. How did that change?
Well, we wanted to, so the nexus was that we wanted people to direct correlation, right? So if you're a GC or a contractor, right, the way the bill was originally drafted, a general contractor could be liable for all his subs because there's 5 or more what was in the bill. So if he had 5 subcontractors or contractors on the site, then he could be ultimately liable for any whistleblower. So if David and his company came on to a large job site, he could be whistleblower, and that general contractor at that point in time would have a tie-in if there was 5 or more. So what we did is we modified the principal language to really just be related to only employees and direct reports. And so this is really kind of keeps it within the company, and it gives some cover for the principals that are in the corporation, right, that make these decisions. We can send you out that modified language that we sent out, but it's definitely in the bill now. We did get buy-off from a lot of labor attorneys, especially those who work in construction. I actually worked with ABC, AGC, and a lot of others to get this language. So actually Jeff Wiest and I with AGC worked on this language with his labor attorneys and the Civil Justice League. So that's where that came from.
Okay, great. Well, anything you and Stefan can give us as a link for reference or where to go to look at language that passed through in the session would be helpful. And is there anything else that didn't pass that we should be watching for in a new session that might reemerge?
I think from our perspective, I think there was a few construction defects bills that got killed that I think may surface depending on how the election goes. I think this election is going to become key in a lot of these business bills. I mean, obviously there is the bills that passed have $1 million of impact. There was a bill that is going to be on the ballot that most people don't understand that raises tobacco taxes to fund schools. That's going to be on the ballot. One of the things that's not on the ballot is going to be, was transportation funding. That got set aside. So obviously there's still some transportation funding set aside for what they call 267 monies, but that's kind of things that I think in the future that are going to be coming up that we'll probably have to put some parameters around. I think the new age of doing inspections and how does the cities and counties fund themselves in this $3 billion shortfall, and soon to be another $3 billion, I think, in the next year. So I think we need to watch that. We may have to play some proactive legislation from IEC to make sure that our business as usual stays forward. I think we found out during COVID, where there is a bunch of holes in the process that potentially need to be looked at. We have worked with DORA. We have some really good friends over there that we have suggested things. And so we may be part of larger working groups trying to look for answers, whether it be in the solar industry, whether it be on how inspections are done, how testing is done. So we will see that probably in the foreseeable future as things really kind of tested the ability to do stuff remotely. Obviously, the big thing for an economic driver is to make sure that building consistently happens, and we don't need hiccups in permit processes or inspections, because obviously that hurts the overall. One of the big reasons why in COVID that construction was deemed essential is they knew if they stopped construction, the economy would have taken a 10 times bigger hit than it already did. And so it was more of a economic decision, but also by the basis of how most construction operates, put it in pretty good, in safer environments. But obviously we're starting to see some of the cases, but we also have seen a lot of increased costs on job sites because a lot of this stuff wasn't in budgets, but people spent it to make sure they could consistently open and stay open during this crisis. So I think those are the things that we'll see moving forward. I'm hoping we don't see a whole lot of, we tried to mitigate all lawsuits and things of potential lawsuits in any legislation so it doesn't open that Pandora's box. There was one on price gouging that we did participate in a few stakeholder meetings and conference calls, and were able to make some edits to that legislation where it was palatable for the construction industry. Obviously, with us getting our materials, we know those prices and transportation costs go up, and so we wanted to make sure those were considered. And we wanted to make sure that whoever brings those are very high level, so the DA or the AG are the only two people that can bring those cases. So we can't have somebody contact their lawyer and say they've been price gouged on a deck or whatever else they had built. So that's we mitigated that issue.
Okay, great, thank you. Kristen, David, Herb, Kurt, any comments, David? David.
Trying to find my mouse. Anyway, yeah, Marilyn had asked that we also give an update from Encore's perspective and contractor's perspective of the legislation. And I think we're doing one of these right now. It could have been bad, quite frankly, and we've been doing a lot of defensive politics and things like that, and I think that all in all, it's not as bad as anticipated, and I can tell you that we are, let's say, cautiously optimistic, because the $3 billion that Jay was referring to earlier, that's and Herb, you were talking about hospitals and things like that. I mean, these are our customers, these are our clients, and while we have backlog today, our clients are beginning to hurt, and the hospitality world is beginning to hurt. And like I said, these are our clients, and so we're cautiously optimistic now, but looking towards the future, it's we want our clients to survive and thrive as we have been able to.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you kind of say is that the best defense is going to be a good offense going forward, for lack of a better way to describe it, right? Kristen or Herb or Kurt, any comments or thoughts on what we've been discussing with the legislative session?
Just going back to the subject of workers' compensation and what's going on, I will say that, for example, Pinnacle Assurance has stepped up to the plate, and anybody who is involved in a COVID-19 situation at work where there's a danger that other people may be infected, Pinnacle is actually paying out the lost wages or the wages for those people to stay at home for 2 weeks. And they do not add that as a workers' compensation claim. So if those people never get sick, their lost wages are covered for 2 weeks while they're at home. Excuse me. And it doesn't count as a workers' compensation claim. I believe that other carriers will follow suit in that because it's in their best interest to keep people home and not let them get sick. But anyway, the industry as a whole is working to kind of contain costs and make sure that things are done the right way. I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, great, thank you.
Deb, following her, if I could just sort of add on from continuing the conversation, next week's safety forum is going to be focused on employee wellness. And we have somebody specifically talking about employee wellness. But I believe Paul and I talked yesterday about inviting someone from Pinnacle to be on. So if any of you are interested in the workers' comp, particularly, and this does impact what we're doing from an employee wellness and care standpoint, I would invite you to also join this forum because that's going to be a topic. And we'll make sure that people.
Okay, I have singing dogs here, so while I go and quiet them down, Marilyn, if there are no other questions for Jay, Marilyn, why don't you help wrap us up and talk about coming events? And David Jones just went visual, and it looks like he's channeling Leland today.
Oh, that's hilarious.
You are the best.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to miss these weekly forums just because I won't see David Jones and Leland having fun with each other on a regular basis. So
we'll set up a Zoom.
That's
Leland, tag you're it.
Yeah, that's so
well,
awesome.
he hit me with that QED banner last week, so I had to step up my game.
Share some love. Share some
there
love.
we go.
There you go.
There it is.
You guys are a hoot. I guess
right.
before I give total wrap up, are there any other questions or comments from any of our contractor members? A few weeks ago, we did a little bit of a round robin on how are you really, what are the positives, what are the challenges, what things might be impacting you that you either have questions of others or that you would like to share. So if anybody has that before I do a wrap up, feel free to add to the conversation. Open to anyone. Okay.
Going once.
Going once, going twice. Yeah. Jay or Stefan, is there anything else that you want to add from a legislative perspective? I had a question to you in that this is an election year, and while candidates may be, or while legislators may be either rejoicing or taking a break this week, depending on their positions of what was success or not for them, we're about to go into full-on election season. So from a contractor perspective, Jay, Stefan, what do you think our contractor members and our industry partners, our business owners should have top of mind for the next few months?
Well, let me start off. So just FYI, one last thing that I wanted to cover was Senate Bill 120, which was the test bill. Obviously, DORA came to us and said that they did not put that on their wish list moving forward, but the proponents of that bill made some heavy phone calls and got that bill passed. But the only way they could get it passed was to defund it. So they passed a bill that had no funding. It was funded by gift grants and donations. So let's be very clear that that's going to take a while for that bill to be implemented. I have talked to Dora to make sure that we're at the table if any implementation is going to go forward. We may need to run subsequent legislation to clarify that once we get the data that comes out of Dora on who has been testing, who's not been testing. And I think with the, obviously, what's going to be great is what's going to happen in September so far. Obviously, we're keeping our eye on that. We were on their short list if anything is going to be modified from the renewal of licenses and whatnot in September. So Dora, obviously, we have a good friend. They didn't want this bill, but the governor didn't get out in front of it and sort of oppose it. But obviously, we'll have to deal with that. But I don't really know how it's going to be implemented with no funding. So Dora will get no compensation for this bill, so they will not be obligated to implement this without some kind of funding. So unless the unions put together, $1 million or whatever it was, I don't think that they're going to be able to be funded to implement this. We will see how it is. So right now, in my version, it's on paper, but without money to actually expend it, I don't know how it's going to go. And I think what we saw in a lot of these bills that got passed, like 1420, which, by the way, I didn't cover that, was heavily amended by the business community to keep its ties to the CARES Act and the federal. Obviously, they mitigated a little bit of the deductions from 500,000 pass-through to cap it at 500,000 for an individual and 1 million for a couple. And then obviously the exemptions for the fuel and all that stuff was pulled out. So there was a lot of changes in that bill. At the end, from a lot of negotiation we did, they actually traded with the sales tax for the tobacco. They did a lot of horse trading to try to get some extra money, but that bill was watered down. And I think it has a 2-year sunset on it, so it's only going to last for a couple of years.
Okay, and Jay, tell us again what the name of that bill was, 1420?
That was the bill that we were watching. It was House Bill 1420 about the taxes. The original legislation was horrible. So that would have uncoupled the state with the federal. So everybody who was doing taxes would have had to file 2 different kinds of taxes. It became such a big, we had multiple groups that were in opposition to this. And I think Pete was going to speak of this, but obviously there is, but a lot of work was done at the end to water this thing down and make sure it still is tied to the CARES Act for a lot. I think the justs were the pass-through on the 199A, the caps were increased from 500,000 and 1 million for joint for just 2 years. Schedule F language is still included. And then obviously including energy sales tax exemption was put back in because they tried to eliminate that. So people who are doing manufacturing and the use of energy or a fuel was kind of exempt. That tax credit was exempted out. It was put back in. And then the rest of it, I think, is palatable and still tied to federal taxes. So I think, although Colorado deviated a little bit from it, I think the majority of it, I think, had been modified. Obviously, a ton of the business community reached out to Polis. Polis actually said if the bill came to him, he would probably veto it. So they worked to make some edits in that bill in the last minute. So those are the 2 remaining things I have. As far as back to Marilyn's original question, it is an election year. It's a big election year. The session ended on, I don't know, is it Monday? I swear I feel like it's Friday. And I got no less than 25 texts yesterday about fundraising. So as soon as the gates open for them, they're doing it. It's going to be a big election year. We participate in the Building Jobs for Colorado interview process, but I think that contractors need to know their legislator, know what race they're in, and participate. There is the ability to, meet with candidates, go from there. Stefan and I have helped multiple of our clients just get meetings or have them come out to facilities to educate them on the business. Obviously, with COVID, it gives everybody, the what ifs. that can happen, and that's why having the right people at the legislature. Technically, we thought we were going to come back to a legislature that was going to cause no harm, and yet we walked away with millions and millions of dollars of added potential costs to businesses moving forward. And so where's that going to all come from? How is it going to be done? So those are the kind of things that, at the end matter. So I think knowing the race that you're in, knowing sort of the outcome. I mean, this is a presidential election, so it's a national election. We have big seats up, and we have a Senate seat up in Colorado. We have all the seats in the House, obviously. Some are protected and go the same way, and some of them are contested. The Senate will have a few races as well, and then obviously there'll be a presidential election. So it's going to be a heavy year of ads and everything. You'll start probably seeing them on your TV soon. But I do, from our perspective and the construction side, making sure that we stay active or at least voice some of your concerns. I think when we put out the call and when Maryland puts out interview schedules or, donating to PACs, I mean, that all matters. I know sometimes especially during this time, it's hard to reach into your pocket, but it definitely helps us navigate the water, try to put the right people in office. And then obviously, they remember their friends who give them $50. So I think, even sitting up and having coffee with potential candidates goes a long way. So it always has and always will. That personal relationship locally always will be remembered. So I know the election season, everybody's going to want to turn their TV off and not watch it, but I think there's still things that we need to pay attention. We will be filtering and, obviously assisting in the races. We do a kind of an outline or a little report as it relates to the election, because the primaries are going to happen here soon. And so once all those, we kind of know what candidates are going to be on the ballot. And so we go from there, and obviously questions matter and research matters. And so those are the things we would like you to get involved in.
Okay.
Jay, it's
Great,
interesting.
thank you.
Jay, while you were talking, I got the draft of the candidate questionnaire that will be going out to candidates that will be used during our interview process with Building Jobs for Colorado. So not only are the fundraising calls coming in, but the preparation for these candidate interviews are happening first thing this morning. So for those of you that, many of our Government Relations Committee members are on the call right now, but if you're not part of our Government Relations Committee and would like to be, just shoot me an email and we will add you to that distribution. We will need to refund our PAC so that we can participate more fully in the candidate relationship building process. So you'll be hearing from me and members of the Government Relations Committee over the summer about what our activities are going to be. And in fact, I just led a webinar with IEC National last week on a lot of the advocacy efforts that we do at the state and local and federal level, because IEC National is going to do a big push in August called Main Street Merit Shop. And they are really trying to get the message of the independent electrical contractors out, more so at a federal level, but it is also something that we'll be able to use in messaging around our state and local candidates as well. So, so moving on from the legislative session to the election season. So, a couple things I want to do. A couple things I want to do just to wrap up, because I know we're over time. Paul is leading the IECRM NECA monthly inspector meeting today. So if you would like to join that monthly meeting, please email Paul at iecrm.org, and Paul can send you the link to be able to participate in that monthly inspector call. Very important opportunity carrying through what Jay just said. It's not only code enforcement, but it is how are inspectors learning from each other and what kind of barriers exist with code enforcement, with a new code cycle coming up. That'll be more and more engaging in the months to come. So we have a couple of members that are on the call that I know have participated in the past, and I just invite you to join in today. Paul, shake your head. 11 o'clock, is that correct, or is it 11:30?
It's 11 o'clock, and thank you for the announcement on that. Such a great meeting that we hold monthly to ensure our electrical contractors, as well as some of our industry partners, are up to speed on not just code enforcement, but it's also a meeting where the top, say, authorities having jurisdiction can ensure code enforcement has some consistency throughout the different counties. And so if you have any questions about code or a process or anything like that, it is a great meeting to attend.
Perfect. A couple of other things that outside of our member forums, next Friday, the 26th of June, the annual clay shoot is a go. We are going to be able to have the clay shoot. We are having to max our because of social distancing and other requirements from Colorado Clays, we will not be able to have more than 120 participants, and we are nearing that number. So if you want to be a shooter, make sure that you log on to our website and get the and get registered for the clay shoot. Paul, we have a question about how to join 11. Could you enter in the chat how people can dial in to the 11 o'clock
here's what I'll do is I'll throw the link in the chat because it doesn't require a registration.
That'd be great.
Let me do that.
That'd be great. So clay shoot next week, you can go on our website to register either a team of 4 or sign up as an individual participant. Also on June 30th is our deadline for the annual Summit Awards. It's your opportunity to recognize the work that you have done over the last year, projects that you have completed, innovations that you have done, partnerships you've worked on with general contractors or your industry partners, and also individually recognize employees, project managers, and others who have made contributions to your company. So I encourage you if you're not the person that's going to submit the Summit Award, make sure that you talk it up within your company. We are going to be doing that recognition in August, and as of now, it is going to be a live virtual event, and we will be encouraging watch parties, but you will not want to miss the show that we're going to put on for the Summit Awards. This Friday and next Friday, Deb Radman and I are going to offer some coaching and advice and helping you put your outline for your submission together, particularly if you're a first-time nominee. Join us from 8 to 9 o'clock, again via a Zoom meeting this Friday and next Friday, and we'll help get you started on your Summit Awards submission. Deb is also offering her own one-on-one 30 minutes of coaching to work on your award outside of the time that we'll be doing together the next 2 Fridays. So just
and if I might add, don't wait till the last minute. Don't wait till the day before, please.
Yeah, we can. Anyway, so we want to see lots of submissions and lots of engagement. I know that there has been a lot of good work done in the last year, and we want to recognize you for it. We are also doing special COVID recognition coming up at the Summit Awards. So if your company has done anything for your employees and or the community, donations or outreach or engagement, we want to recognize you. It's not a competitive award. We just are going to bring everyone together for the recognition for people that have stepped up, for companies and individuals that have stepped up during this time. With that, I want to say—
Oh, Marilyn, one quick thing.
Yes.
You forgot to mention, and if I can share my screen here, there is a, there you go. Shoot, wrong one. Hang on one second. Let's see. Here it is right there. Okay. Later today, there's David Jones fan club meeting, and I just wanted to invite you all to it.
Game
Get us the
on.
link, David.
Mandatory attendance.
Game on, dude.
So I hope all those people are going to be in masks because they don't look very socially distanced. But
That's right. That was the last meeting. It's an annual.
That was last year.
last meeting. Yeah, there you go. We have to just wear our inner tubes or our hula hoops or something so that we keep distance this afternoon. That's awesome. Thanks again. These member forums have been important to us, I hope important to you, and we will continue to do them. We're going to back off and do them every other week instead of weekly. However, we are here 24/7, so if you ever need anything that is a question that has come up or a question that hasn't yet come up, reach out. We will get you connected to the right resource, and if we need to pull a member forum together on a special topic, we'll do it on a dime. So just want to thank all of you for your participation.
Yes,
And
thank
I'd
you.
like to thank our subject matter experts for being with us this morning and all of the wonderful information that you've contributed. And Paul?
Oh, no, I just wanted to thank everybody once again. I did put the link for the inspector meeting in the chat. Okay, it's got the telephone numbers as well as just the pop-in link. There's no registration required. Join us for those. I also put the dates of the following or up and coming scheduled NECA meetings in there, so that if it's something you really like and then want to put it on calendar, it's in there. So, and then I think Marilyn really covered everything else that I needed to cover. Just to thank everybody and tune in next week for employee wellness and mental health when it comes to dealing with everything that we're dealing with now and being able to identify things and hopefully work things out with amongst your team. So having said that, I want to thank everybody once again.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for being on the call. You're
Thank
all
you.
awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.
Adios.
Fan club. You guys are great. Thank you, subject matter experts. I appreciate every one of you.
Thanks for the opportunity, Marilyn. Appreciate it. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm going to start releasing. Stefan, have a good one. Thanks for joining us. Don, appreciate you joining us. We're going to go ahead and remove you. Kathleen or John, appreciate you joining in. Brenda, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Holly, I'm coming where you are.
I know, look, she's getting a tan just by sitting in front of that thing.
Yes, my tan's peeling this morning.
Look at the last peonies behind me. Can everybody see my flowers?
Oh, yeah.
Those are peonies
Pretty.
from my yard, and they were, I got a very small harvest this year, but they're so beautiful.
Yeah, I love peonies. Anyway.
All right, good job. And Deb, sorry, you caught on to that I added like 3 lines to your questions, but the agenda you put together for today was fantastic. I'm sorry. I fell asleep.
Thank you. Well,
I fell asleep
I
at like
just want to save you some time on these. So, you know, like a short conversation like we had, I can probably rough things out, and then all you have to do is.
Well, you nailed it. You nailed it. Just a couple things that that I added, but it would have been fine had I not even added anything. You were on it. But I fell asleep early last night, so.
Good for you.
It's good for you, yeah.
All right, I'll get the recap done once I get the notes from Holly, and
thank you again, Holly. You always do such a great job on the back end.
yeah, you do great notes.
And Holly, a couple things. Today might have been a little hard to follow because of legislative bills.
Yes.
I am going to send you the bill tracker that that we use on the Government Relations Committee. That will have it's just a link, and you can make a reference in notes for all of the bills that we tracked during the legislative session. We can, people can refer to that particular section. So DJ's on, but don't cut him off.
Oh, I just cut him off.
He might have been trying to make it. I actually need him for something. So
gotta be quick. Okay,
he didn't know that. So
okay,
he might have been calling. He might have been dialing back in to ask me something. But I'll reach him. I'll reach him separately. I want to make sure he's.
Stop the recording.
I want to make sure he's signed up for the clay shoot because he's